girls of Reddit, what is the most embarrassing thing you have done to impress a guy? Dedicated, my heart will go on to him at my school talent show. I was 12. God damn it, why did I do the things I did back then? Oh god, the cringe. In high school, I spent a summer at a pre-college program for fine art. The ratio of women to men was something like 10:1. Of course I focused in on one room of guys, all 4 of which were cool, but I liked one in particular. He was super fun and cool. He wanted to go for a run for exercise, so I acted super excited and went along. I've never run for exercise in my life, and I have flat feet problems so bad they warranted a note from my doctor to excuse me from any running and gym classes in school. We got 10 minutes into the run and my feet hurt so bad I was contemplating forcibly jettisoning them. Not to mention my throat and lungs were on fire. Bonus, he gave me a piggyback ride back to our dorm. Double rainbow bonus, he soon after revealed to me that he was gay. I was really into this one guy in high school. He loved hockey and I had zero knowledge on the subject, so instead of doing anything useful with my time, I memorized every team member's name, position, and any stats that were worth noting of his favorite team. I even looked into the rival team. Every day at school, I would bring up hockey with my friends who sat near him in class. They also had zero knowledge on hockey, so it was like talking to a brick wall. But man, was I persistent. I ended up being overheard by him one day, thank goodness, and he asked me a bunch of questions about this team. Who is your favorite player? How do you think we're doing? If I caught the game the other night, etc. I was ecstatic that he was talking to me, so naturally, I start stuttering and fumbling over my words because I was so excited. I kept giggling like a fool. He just looked at me like I was an idiot. 2 weeks later he started dating another girl. 5 years later, they're still together. Shame. Favorite with a U and using hockey to impress guys. True Canadian here. Had a huge crush on this one guy in high school. Made him a Christmas card that said Merry Christmas. I'd gladly jingle your bells. Got sent to the principal's office for a talking to about harassment. I had a crush on another guy and while working at a pizza place drew boobs with pepperonis on his pizza. High school was a pretty awkward time for me. Also, I'm a huge perv. Hahaha, oh my god. No, you're great. I posted this in the other thread, but now it's actually appropriate. D. In the 7th grade, I once purposely fell down in the hallway to get a guy to notice me. I thought I'd pull the cute and clumsy thing and he'd help me pick up my books and ask me if I was okay or whatever. None of that happened. I fell, slammed my jaw on the floor and started crying from the shock. See? Not really to impress, but embarrassing nonetheless. When I was in high school I used to work at an indoor pool, at the front desk area. There was a lifeguard there who was so hot. I don't even remember what his face looked like because it was just like staring into the sun to look at him. He was also really nice and cool and I got a pretty big crush on him. One time I was sitting at my desk and he came in the front doors to walk toward the lifeguard office. He looked over at me, smiled, and said, "Hey." I was so shocked that he was actually speaking to me, coupled with the usual nervous feeling I got when he was around, that I forgot I'd just taken a big gulp of water from my bottle. I smiled back and said hi without first swallowing the water, and it spilled from my mouth, all down the front of me. I just kind of sat in frozen, humiliated defeat as he kept on walking as if nothing happened. For a few weeks after I consoled myself by thinking he probably didn't even notice. This may or may not be relevant to the post, as I did it all without his knowing. I was having bowel trouble, as in the poop chute wouldn't poot, and had to take a round of laxatives. The gentleman caller and I had been on a few dates and after an unexpected late night visit he slept over. In the wee hours of the morning the rumble began, and uncomfortably I shifted in bed for several grueling hours while the laxatives worked their magic. My stomach was aching but I lacked the nerve to get up and go because of notoriously thin bathroom walls. Finally I could take it no longer and in a frenzy of exhaustion and desperate need I took a trash bag and roll of toilet paper outside of my apartment and let it all out. I crouched down on my welcome mat, put the bag under me, and let loose. I didn't care if a neighbor walked out or not. I had a great crap on my front porch. It was quick and it worked. But damn it if I didn't drop a load of self-respect in that bag too. All for a guy. so he wouldn't hear me fart. TLDR. Didn't want the guy to hear me using the toilet, so I pooped on the front porch in a trash bag. Hey, people are telling you that you were being silly and I agree with them, but I just want you to know that that's the bravest thing I ever heard and I'm so proud of you. I met a guy at the movie theater and we hit it off pretty well, and he mentioned where he worked and what time he got off, so I woke up at like 4 AM and drove 45 minutes out to his work and sat in the parking lot. When he got off of work I said, oh, I was just in the neighborhood and wanted to see if you wanted to get some breakfast with me. I'm embarrassed by this, but he still says it's the sweetest thing anyone's done for him. I had the biggest crush on the quiet, mysterious guy in high school. Capital I. Couldn't work up the courage to tell him, so one day I professed my love to him on notebook paper that had been neatly folded in little squares. I was too scared to hand them to him, so in class passing, I called his name out and threw all the notes at his face. I figured my poetic words of love would overpower his, and my moment of high school embarrassment misery. LOL, that's amazing. I'm not laughing at you, just the awkward way in which teenagers overcome fears. 8th grade. Baseball game. Some people were throwing around beach balls, tossing them from person to person in the stands. I noticed that attractive special someone from science class standing nearby. I could tell from his face that he was looking to catch the ball. So, of course I reasoned that if I could catch it first and toss it to him, it would result in his proclaiming his undying love for me, right? Well, that's not exactly how it turned out. The beach ball drew near to me, and I leaped up, hopeful arms outstretched, momentarily forgetting my clumsy, gangly 70 inches of awkwardness. My hands closed on empty space. For a moment, I hung there suspended, before gravity began to draw me back to earth. I plunged downward, but because my jump had propelled me forward somewhat, I did not make contact with the ground. I instead tumbled forward, over 3 rows of seats, and landed on top of my math teacher and his girlfriend. Even worse, I kicked my mother in the neck on my way down, which eventually resulted in her having surgery, and that's when I heard it. Laughter, echoing from the very one I hoped to impress. He had seen it all. No declarations of love were made that day. TLDR. Trixie beach balls. Which eventually resulted in her having surgery. You win this thread. I went on a date with this guy in 6th grade, and we got ice cream. Whilst eating the ice cream, I started to choke on a sprinkle or something. For whatever reason I thought, if I start having a cough he'll think I'm weird, so instead I tried to discreetly clear my throat. Turns out it was not discreet at all and I sounded like a goat trying to mate. He called me out on it, said I was weird, and left. That guy was kind of a dong. Bullet dodged. I beat up my crush when I was like 11 because I didn't know how to act around him. I kicked him in the ankles as hard as I could whenever he was around his locker. Ugh. One of those things you think about by accident when you're trying to go to bed. So embarrassing. In high school I had a huge crush on an older guy, but could not think of how to begin a conversation with him. So one day, I say, "You're Peter, right?" And he says, "Yeah," and I say, "Oh, I met a guy at a party who knows you." Obviously I'm cool because now he knows I go to parties, right? So then he says, "Oh, yeah, what's his name?" And I'm like, "I don't remember," and he slowly says, "So, where do I know him from?" And I start to panic and realize that this was a really poorly thought out plan. I say, "I'm not sure." Then we look at each other in awkward silence for a few seconds and then he says, "Okay, see you later." And that was that. Dang. In high school, before texting was really popular and we'd write notes on paper to talk to each other, my best friend and I were writing notes to each other about this boy I had a crush on. It was pretty vulgar. The teacher caught on to our note passing and asked me to read my note to the entire class. Obviously I said number. I remember the note reading something along the lines of what was going to happen after getting wasted at a party the following weekend. Definitely didn't want to read that out loud. The teacher then demanded that I bring the note up to him and he'll read it. So being the quick thinking genius I was, I sneakily grabbed another piece of paper from off my desk and handed that to him. Then my dumb ass and the boy I was crushing on got sent to the principal's office because what I had handed the teacher was a love poem, also decently vulgar, that I had written and was going to give to the crush. The principal had no problem reading the poem in front of us before realizing that my crush had nothing to do with what was written on the page. Past being the inspiration of them, I sat there traumatized while bawling my eyes out because I probably wasn't actually going to let him know what was written in the love poem. TLDR. Got caught passing notes in class. Principal reads vulgar love poem to crush that I wasn't going to send. You should have eaten that crap. That's what I did when I got caught with notes I didn't want to read. Only once. I felt bold as frick. My teacher hated me, and the other kids lost their crap. I was in the 5th grade though. It wasn't a sexy time letter obviously, but I still didn't want it read. In high school my crush was into skateboarding and I knew he was at a local skate area. I went with some guy friends and thought he would really notice me if I was on the half pipe. Never even stood on a skateboard, so of course this would work out. I climb onto the half pipe and my friends, knowing that I don't have a clue what I'm doing, give me some tips. Lean forward into the half pipe and even yourself out. I look across the room to where my crush is and see him watching. Now's my chance. I inch the skateboard forward to the edge with my bad self and over I go. I forgot to lean forward and instead leaned backward. The skateboard went flying from under my feet, twisted me around, and my eye socket landed on the metal bar on the edge. Everyone in the entire place went dead silent and my friends helped me walk away, picking up my pride. My crush saw the whole thing. We bought a house together last year and have an awesome daughter. Yep, that's how we roll. Damn it, Reddit, stop giving me hopes about meeting my future wife by acting incredibly awkward. I've got one, but it's kind of long so I apologize in advance. In 8th grade I had hoarded away some fireworks from the 4th of July just because I like fire and explosions, like most people. Fast forward a few months to December and I had mentioned my awesome collection to the guy I really liked. He said he would love to be there when I wanted to light them off. Coincidentally, my parents were going to be taking my brother to a week-long hockey tournament in Canada and had agreed to let me stay at my friend's house. We'll call her B. So the first night I'm staying at B's house we set plans to sneak out and meet him so we could light them off. Her bedroom is on the 2nd story, so we climbed out the window onto the roof that covered the garage. It was covered in snow and as I walked to the edge to look down to where I would be landing, I sort of slipped and jumped at the same time. OW, my ankle really hurt when I landed. She jumped down without issue and tried to help me up. I told her it hurt. It really hurt, but I really liked the guy we were meeting up with and didn't want to look like a wuss. About that time he gets to her house and sees me kind of limping. He wisely explains to me that I twisted it and that walking on it will make it better. We get half a block away and I can't stand the pain, so we bail and decide to try again later in the week. The next day my ankle was really sore, but we needed to hide it from her parents so they didn't find out about the fireworks sneaking out. 3 days go by and it isn't any better. It's hugely swollen and wicked painful, but we spend most of the time laying around watching TV to hide it. I wake up on day 4 and I passed out from the pain when I took my first step out of bed. She panics and tells her parents I twisted it playing in the snow and we need to go to the hospital. Now my mom had given them a medical release form, but her alcoholic mother had lost it. The docs can't really do anything without my parents' permission, but B's dad convinces them to put on a temporary cast. So finally my parents come home a few days later and they take me straight to the hospital to get it looked at. They do x-rays and apparently I had crushed my ankle and caused damage to the tibia. As I kept walking on it, the bone split the full length of the tibia and the doctor said we needed to do surgery now. I was rushed into surgery and now have titanium screws in my ankle for life. D. TL. DR. Crushed my ankle sneaking out of the house to meet up with the guy I liked. He tells me to walk on it to make it better. Now I have screws in my ankle. That's pretty metal. In high school I chugged a bunch of Captain Morgan straight from the bottle. He was actually really impressed until I passed out on the couch in the middle of some party. He took care of me the rest of the night too. And by taking care of me the rest of the night I mean he made sure nothing happened to me. When I was in high school, I had a horrible crush on a guy that hung out in the music room. In my small, homely school that made him a certified cool kid. I knew he found it funny when I tripped, so I decided to stage myself an accident so he would laugh and or help me up and or marry me and grant my teenage fantasy. So, waiting patiently in the shadows, I timed this exquisite display of gracelessness just as he entered the room, summoned up my courage, and fake stumbled. My fake stumble became a very real fall and I descended the steps toward him screaming like a recently castrated banshee. Rather than catching me, he moved out of the way, I presume in terror, and I landed on a massive guitar amp. Not only did I discover that chivalry is dead, but when I looked later on that day, I had a mango-sized black, purple and red bruise on my side that lasted a month. 5 years later, I'm still called Twinkle-Toes in my hometown. Screaming like a recently castrated banshee, you saying it. When I was in 5th grade I stole my friend's school directory and found my crush's phone number. He went to a different school. This was in the early phases of caller ID and my family did not have caller ID so I assumed no one did. Anyways, I called him like 25 times that day and hung up every time he answered. He eventually called my house back and asked why I kept calling. Remember this was before caller ID so I didn't know he was the one calling. I told him that my older brother was the one who was calling and wanted to know if he wanted to play flashlight tag. So he said he would love to play flashlight tag and would come right over. The only problem was my brother wasn't home and no such game of flashlight tag existed. So when he rode his bike over, he had the coolest helmet. I told him that everyone ran away and were playing flashlight tag somewhere else. So he stayed there and we talked on my front porch for a few hours. He then asked me out and took me to his school's fun fair. Anyways, we dated off and on through college and are still good friends. Did not expect that to work. We were having a water fight, and my crush walked by. I walked up behind him and poured water down the back of his neck. The look he gave me was a mix of anger and pure terror. I ran away. I was on the receiving end of water like that once. I still feel so bad about how angry I got. When I was 17 I had a crush on an 18-year-old punk guy. I was pretty dang preppy and he wasn't into preppy girls so I got my friend to dress me up in punk clothes and she did my hair and makeup as well. Went to a party he was at and everyone was shotgunning beers. He showed me how and I did too. He then took a bunch of shots of Jack and apparently I decided I could keep up drinking with him. We did shot for shot and I ended up wasted. He thought this was cute I guess and so we went into a different room to make out and I projectile vomited all over him in the room and my friend who came in to check on me. So he gave me his shirt and took my vomit soaked clothing and put it in the tub and we went to sleep. Became friends. Never hooked up though. I guess vomiting on someone turns them off. When I was in 5th grade I lied and told this guy that I played bass guitar in a band. Fast forward to music class and he tries to get me to play in front of the entire class of 30 plus judgmental 5th graders. I said I couldn't because I left my pick at home. Back in high school there was one day where we were allowed to sit somewhere other than our assigned seats in government class. I sat in front of two guys I liked so I had my pants lower a bit, my shirt raised a bit, and made sure those guys could see my thong. I realize now that it just looks really yes. Trust me, they were staring the whole class period. No doubt. In the 6th grade I moved to Philadelphia from overseas and developed the biggest crush on a boy. He invited the entire grade to his bar mitzvah, but I was sure this was the event he would notice Kiss propose to me. I raided my mom's closet and found a box with the most beautiful pale pink dress. I stole it, wore it, and waltzed out of the house with it under my coat feeling very smug. Turns out what I stole was not a dress but a practically see-through slip and he was not staring at me because I was fashion forward, exotic and beautiful. He, and the rest of my class, was staring because you could see my sturdy white training bra and underwear. I was humiliated, cried and his aunt drove me home since my mom was at work. I don't remember Sam ever talking to me again. TLDR. Met a beautiful Jew, showed him and all his family my goods. Oh boy, here goes. Had a crush on one guy, really crushing hard. I had some drawing skills, so I drew his yearbook picture, carried it around with me for the better part of the school year. Different school, different boy. He seemed really sad and deep, and I thought he was freaking beautiful. He was very antisocial, so I wrote him this heartfelt note. It was like 6 pages long. I stared at him pointedly for like a week before I gave it to him. I thought my knowing insight into his dark, troubled soul would win his affection. He never spoke to me, and I stopped staring at him. Same school, different guy, really popular, gorgeous, super nice guy. He befriended me because I was somewhat new, and he thought I was funny. I decided to be smart this time, and have an actual friendship with my crush before I revealed how I felt. But then, I don't know what I was thinking. I tried to impress him by telling him about my Wiccan beliefs. He seemed interested, so I told him I knew how to do spells, and all of mine worked. I ended up performing spells for him, and thought I was golden, until I told him how I felt, in a dang note, and he graciously let me down. I was freaking weird in high school. No wonder none of my friends from then talk to me now. Jonathan, weird kid, and Elliot, if you're reading this, I'm so sorry. Apparently the love spells failed. In high school I learned how to solve the Rubik's Cube. I ended up being one of the fastest girls in the school to solve it, all because I knew people would force me and him to race each other. After those cherished times it would happen. My heart would be pounding too hard for me to think of how to talk to the guy. I also signed up for AP Physics because he was taking that class. I never gathered the courage to talk to him. I love how you figured out how to solve a Rubik's Cube at incredible speeds, and yet figuring out how to talk to the guy was too hard. On the first date with my now boyfriend, which I had no idea if it was or wasn't a date, I gave him a book about sex. I facepalmed myself for about a week. Thank you, Mary Roach. Bold move. Now boyfriend. Looks like it paid off. Tried to sing karaoke. I'm extremely shy and I finally got the courage. I got nervous because everyone turned to look at me, and then he came and rescued me by singing Summer Night's Grease in a high-pitched girl voice. That's really cute, haha. Towards the middle of high school, I'd make obvious hints on fricking LiveJournal and in conversation that I was frisky, and would make flimsy covers so that it wasn't me being explicitly I want to frick you. Most of the dudes were awkward guy friends. It was pretty obvious, but it was also obvious that they weren't interested or were weirded out. I had absolutely no experience with dating or physical intimacy, was a frisky thing, and was lonely. The bro zone. In 2nd grade I had a crush on this kid, obviously, and I wrote him notes with little happy faces and stuff on them. He ignored them. Then later on, we were walking in the hallway and I was behind him. I wanted to hug him because crush. To not make it seem weird, I pretended to trip so that I would fall into him and I would hug him. I held on to him much longer than needed and he stopped talking to me after that. To not make it seem weird, I pretended to trip so that I would fall into him. Nope. Still weird. I'm a guy who has done plenty of really embarrassing things to impress girls, but there is one thing a girl did for me that was incredibly embarrassing to me, and I can only presume it was for her too. I had a friend who was really into fanfiction and /fiction in high school. She wrote a ton of the stuff all the time and was really involved in LiveJournal communities and stuff like that back in the days when people actually cared about LiveJournal. I wasn't into this stuff at all, but she really liked to write, and so sometimes I would read over her stuff and give her pointers or just general feedback about her writing. She was always really quiet and at some point she developed a huge crush on me. I figured it out at some point. It was pretty obvious, but she had never told me outright and I didn't want to say anything about it because I wasn't really interested and I didn't want to freak up our friendship by rejecting her, especially when she had never said anything in the first place. Anyway, one day I'm just minding my own business when a friend comes up to me with a bunch of papers. He's ecstatic, and by the look on his face I know something must be terribly juicy. He starts reading them in front of me and a few of our friends, and once he gets a bit into it, I realize what it is. I recognize the writing, and I recognize the storytelling and the content. It's a fictional story about her and me, and it's got the same tone as her fanfiction stories. It was very sexual in nature, and he proceeded to read pretty much the whole thing out to the guys as I attempted to wrestle it from his hands. I never lived that one down, and neither did she. Apparently she had stuck it to the front of my locker with a magnet, and he happened to be walking by and saw it, so he nabbed it. I was never really able to look her in the eye again because it was so uncomfortable. It was a real shame, too, because she was one of the only intelligent people I knew in high school. Ladies, never write sex fiction about a dude unless he's never going to read it. TL. DR. Freaking magnets. Man, should have let him finished, and smirking at him, I don't see any girls writing erotic stories about you. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.